Hello everyone and welcome back to Kobean History. Today we are gonna have a look at a little bit of a different topic than I usually cover. We are gonna cover some Chinese history, and this video is part of the Project Imperial China playlist. So at the end of the video there will be a link to the playlist if you want to check out some more videos from my fellow history YouTubers on this topic. In this video we'll talk about a few topics. To start with, I will mention how succession worked with the Chinese emperors. Then I'll talk about what the mandate of heaven is, which was an integral part of the legitimacy of the Emperor of China. And to end the video, I'll talk more about what the tributary system of China was, as it's pretty different to what we think of as tributary systems in the Western world. In 221 BCE, after the then king of Qin completed the conquest of the various kingdoms of the Warring States period, he adopted a new title to reflect his prestige as a ruler greater than the rulers that came before him, and he styled himself the first emperor. The title of emperor was hereditary, traditionally passed from father to son in each dynasty. In the case the emperor had no male offspring, the throne was assumed by a younger brother of the emperor, and if they didn't have a younger brother, it would often pass to one of their uncles, which is pretty similar to other succession systems throughout the world. In most of the Chinese dynasties, the eldest son of the emperor and the empress succeeded to the throne. In some cases, when the emperors did not bear any children, the emperor might have had a child with another of his many wives, who could succeed him. Even though there was only one empress, the emperor was allowed to have more than one wife. There were also different positions between the wives, and the rank of the wife also decides where their son is in the line of succession. Children of higher wives always had priority, so this could lead to tricky situations where a son of a lower ranking wife might be older, but due to their mother's rank they would still be subordinate to a younger half-brother. Wars of succession were sometimes started between rival sons, and in an attempt to prevent these disputes, the emperor, while he still lived, often designated a crown prince. Even this as well often bred jealousy, distrust and backstabbing within the line of succession. Whether it was the crown prince plotting against the emperor himself, or brothers plotting against each other, some emperors, like the Yongzheng emperor, after abolishing the crown prince position, placed succession papers in a sealed box, which was only to be opened and announced after his death. I should also mention that there were a few instances of empresses succeeding the throne, so it wasn't all emperors. So far, this system of succession is relatively similar to the monarchies we know from Europe and other places around the world. But what makes the Chinese imperial system stand out is the concept of the mandate of heaven, which allowed for a change in the ruling house even when the current dynasty still had legitimate claimants to the throne. The theory behind the mandate of heaven was that the Chinese emperor acted as the son of heaven, and held a mandate to rule over everyone else in the world, but only as long as he served the people well. Here, heaven embodies the natural order and will of the universe, and it is heaven who bestows the mandate on a just ruler of China, who then became the son of heaven. If the emperor did not serve his people well or lost favor with heaven in any other way, heaven could take this mandate away from the ruling emperor and give it to someone else when a new just ruler emerged. If this was the case, heaven would show the people its disapproval of the current emperor by way of famine, floods, or other types of natural disasters. If the emperor did not do enough to help his people through these troubles, or if more misfortune befell the country, it was a sign that a rebellion was justified. So there would often be revolts following major disasters, with sometimes numerous claimants to the title of Emperor of China wanting to show that they were more deserving to rule than the current emperor. And the concept of the mandate of heaven could essentially legitimize the person who emerged as the victor. If a ruler was successfully overthrown, it was seen as confirmation that the ruler was unworthy and had lost the mandate. The mandate of heaven does not require a ruler to be of noble birth. Instead, how well the person can rule is the thing that matters here. This caused interesting situations, such as the Han and the Ming dynasties, which were founded by men of common birth. And successful invaders who weren't even ethnic Han Chinese could form new dynasties as well, such as the Mongol Yuan dynasty and the Manchu Qing dynasty. They also did not have to give up any of their former titles, which meant that Kublai Khan, for example, was both Khagan of the Mongols and Emperor of China at the same time. Creating a dynasty wasn't as simple as just overthrowing the previous one. Rituals and traditions had to be performed to legitimize the new dynasty. Owning symbolic items such as the Nine Ding or the heirloom seal of the realm increased legitimacy as well. Making a compilation of the history of the preceding dynasty was also considered to be one of the hallmarks of legitimacy, as the list of official dynasties was the one made by the official dynastic histories, meaning that if the new dynasty did not do this, the previous dynasty would not have been considered legitimate, making their overthrowal of that dynasty meaningless. In the ages to follow, these new rulers and their successors had to continue being good for the people to avoid being overthrown themselves. While the first emperor only adopted his title in 221 BCE, the concept of the mandate of heaven dates back much further than that, and was first used to support the rule of the kings of the Zhao dynasty, and legitimized their overthrow of the earlier Shang dynasty. The most important thing about the mandate of heaven was the right of rebellion against an unjust ruler. In a system that had few other ways to keep a ruler in check, it was often invoked by philosophers and scholars as a way to diminish abuse of power. The Tributary System of China, or Shifeng system, was a network of loose international relations centered around China, which facilitated trade and foreign relations by acknowledging China's supremacy. It involved various types of relations, such as trade, military force, diplomacy, and ritual. The term tributary system, strictly speaking, is a Western invention, as in English we don't really have a specific term to describe what would be considered the tributary system of China. So it did not work in the exact same way as tributary relations in the Western world. Instead, the Chinese tributary system is often associated with a Confucian world order, under which neighboring states complied and participated in the tributary system to secure guarantees of peace, investiture, and trading opportunities. The other countries followed China's formal ritual in order to keep the peace with the more powerful neighbor. China did not tend to meddle in the tributaries' internal government, and in almost all cases, they were still pretty much fully independent. This relationship with China was even seen as a boost in legitimacy for some rulers of the tributaries, as when they acknowledged China as their superior, they would be given a crown, official seal, and formal robes to confirm them as the king of their nation. The rulers of Joseon in particular sought to legitimize their rule through reference to Chinese authority. On the other hand, for nations such as Japan, identifying with Chinese authority could actually hurt their own ruler's legitimacy. In these politically tricky situations, sometimes a false king was set up to receive tributary benefits. An interesting exception to this happened in 1404, when Shogun Ashikaga Yoshimitsu accepted the Chinese title of King of Japan. While not being the Emperor of Japan, the shogun was the de facto ruler. The Emperor of Japan was just a powerless figurehead. So for a brief period, until Yoshimitsu's death in 1408, Japan was an official tributary of the Ming Dynasty. The tributary relations between China and Japan ended altogether in 1549, when Japan chose to end its recognition of Chinese superiority and cancel any further tributary missions. By exiting the system, Japan relinquished its trade relationship with China, and a period of isolation followed not long after. The Chinese tributary system required a set of rituals from the tributary states as a way of regulating diplomatic relations. The main rituals generally included the sending of missions by tributary states to China, the missionary envoys kowtowing, which is a special type of bowing, before the Chinese emperor as a symbolic recognition of their inferiority, and acknowledging their status as a vassal state. The presentation of tribute to the emperor, this was usually some sort of item or gift from their local lands, sometimes even exotic animals or items not known in China. And in turn, the Emperor of China would give the vassals a gift as well, which was usually more valuable than the tribute itself. This was because in Chinese culture, the giving of gifts is also a sign of your prestige. As in, if you could give a really expensive gift, it would show you're very wealthy and powerful. And then the Chinese emperor would also confirm the legitimacy of the tributary king over his land. After the completion of the rituals, the tributary states also engaged in their desired business, such as forming trade relations. The practice of investing in non-Chinese neighbors had been present since ancient times, but the tributary system only became formalized during the early years of the Ming Dynasty. The tribute entailed a foreign court sending envoys and exotic products to the Chinese emperor. The emperor then gave envoys gifts in return and permitted them to trade in China. Although the previously mentioned rituals involved acknowledging the state as vassals under China, this was more of a theatrical and symbolic subordinance, as in practice, the states within the tributary system were virtually autonomous and carried out their own agendas. China might have influenced their tributaries in certain ways, but they rarely intervened in the politics of the nation, and tributary states could usually expect no military assistance from China should they be invaded. The exception being when China itself felt threatened. For example, under the rule of the Wanli Emperor, the Japanese invasion of Korea posed a threat to the Imperial Chinese tributary system, and thus China helped Korea in driving Japan back off the mainland. Tributaries were also not forced to mimic Chinese institutions, so some did not care much for the Chinese practices and traditions. Instead, they manipulated the Chinese tributary practices for their own financial benefit, as the gifts given out by the emperors and the trade permits granted were of greater value than the tribute they had to give to the emperor itself. So tributary states sent as many tributary missions as they could. In 1372, the Hongwu Emperor restricted tribute missions from Joseon and 6 other countries to just one every 3 years. But the Ryukyu Kingdom was not included in this list, and they sent 57 tributary missions from 1372 to 1398, an average of 2 missions per year. Since geographical density and proximity was not an issue, regions with multiple kings, such as the Sultanate of Sulu, benefited immensely from this exchange. as each king could send separate envoys. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to know more about Imperial Chinese history, you can check out the Project Imperial China playlist on screen right now. And I'd like to thank my patrons for their support, especially my $25 patrons Parker Dye and G. David.